Sales is another myth. The day never ends. You don't have to be the loudest in the room to get your numbers.
Any memory the first time you were selling something?
My 2 months in the heat of summers of Delhi, I was at the petrol pump. I just fell in love with the concept of directly interacting and not just sitting at the back and on a drawing board just drawing.
What is different in FMCG?
One thing which you learn in FMCG is not just selling, it's also resource management. The factory which exports talent everywhere in every industry.
How did you come to the conclusion that I am not doing that?
I did brand strategy, brand architecture, and when I came in the front end where I had to handle the sales of the same product, really that was a moment of truth for me.
One career decision that you've taken, which possibly at the time you were scared of.
I think when I took a decision of leaving Coke and joining a startup, I was 40. I remember my father telling me, "Are you sure? You have kids?" I almost had weeks of sleepless nights. It is actually you're competing with.
So guys, today we have on the Revenue Podcast somebody very, very special. I'm super excited to have Pallavi with us. Pallavi, thanks for doing this. And Pallavi brings 2 decades of experience with herself. She has possibly started with Wipro Consumer Care to Coca-Cola and like e-commerce business at Oran. And now she's leading all of direct to consumer business at Detail. 20,000 people? Wow, 20,000 people. And I think she's somebody who has seen sales from grounds up, from FMCG, now telecom and e-commerce as well. So I think she brings a lot of insights and experience that we can bring to you guys. And hopefully this conversation will be something that will be very interesting for you. I cannot miss in her introduction that she has also kind of been to the base camp of Mount Everest. So she's literally climbing corporate mountains and also the literal ones, right? And we'll definitely, I think, touch base that aspect as well. But yes, I think thanks for doing this. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Amir. My pleasure. I'm very happy to be on the Revenue podcast. Thank you for having me here.
Perfect. Let me tell you why we're doing this, right? Just to give you context. When I meet young people in these campuses, they want to do branding, marketing, strategy, ops, consulting. Nobody says sales. So we definitely want to change that. And the irony is, if you look at Fortune 500 companies and you look at the CEOs yourself, right? You're people who spend a large chunk of your career in sales or revenue, right? But still, everybody wants to be that, but not do sales. And the elevation of this entire profession has to happen. Because I personally feel early on, if you get to do sales, the exposure you get is altogether different, right? The thick skin you grow, the travel exposure, talking to people across industries, different sort of distributors to channel partners. It's a different experience altogether. So I think definitely we want to touch base on those conversations and bring. And also I think when you started in sales, I'm assuming that maybe 10 years back, 12 years back,
10 years.
15 years, right? Even today, sales is a male dominated profession, more or less, right? I cannot even imagine what it was 15 years back.
So I must share with you, I lead Airtel stores.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud that it's a gender balanced team.
Oh, wow.
So this is one space where we have a very, very good representation of both men and the women.
That's amazing. But I think 15 years back, we would love to hear what was your experience like. I think somebody doing sales and that was FMCG back then, right? So I think would love to even get into that. So okay, I think let me start and get to it. Tell me your first memory of your sales experience, right? Something where it could be even before you did a job.
Yeah.
Could be even before you were in college. I don't know, right? Everybody shares their different story.
Right.
But any memory the first time you were selling something?
So, yes, when you say the first February, I remember my summers. I was in my MBA. And in the first year, I did summers with GE SBI credit cards. And it was my first corporate experience. And interestingly, I got a sales assignment. And they had this value added feature called balance transfer. And I think they were not able to meet their target, so gave it to a young management trainee, summer trainee actually, saying that, this is your target and you achieve it. And that was my first probable stint with sales. I remember connecting with the team which was selling it. And and they had front end team members off role who used to meet customers and try to transfer the balance from a credit card, and that was a hook to enter to GESBI credit card. It was so interesting because I realized at the point of sale where all of this conversation and conversion happens is actually a lot of it was coming from petrol pumps. Because as where customer would stop, they would fill their petrol, they would use credit cards, and that was a very good moment for the sales team to actually interact with the customer. The customer has time because they are filling in petrol. Uh, so my 2 months in the heat of summers of Delhi, I was at the petrol pump. Of course, not, I had a team and I also tried to do the pitch to understand the challenges the teams were going through. Eventually, I made my summer presentation sharing uh, what the team challenges the teams are facing, why this product is not selling, and I gave proposal of what we could change. But yes, that was my first experience right there in the heat at the petrol pump, interacting with customers, and I think I just fell in love with the concept of directly interacting and not just sitting at the back and on a drawing board just drawing, but actually being there and dotting your hands.
Wow, that's amazing. I think you shared something very interesting, and I want to double click on that. You said that it was very important for you to do it yourself so that then you can understand the challenges, right? I think that's a very good insight. Tell me how you do things today. Now you have how many 1,500 plus stores, 20,000 people, and still they're selling, they're doing all the things that obviously business requires them to.
Right.
How do you do it today?
Many of these things kind of stay with you, right? So for example, in Coke, and I will start from there and I will come to what I do today. I remember in Coke, this was one of the cores of what we did. And this was top pledge. uh, Many of our Coke salespeople have to go to the retail outlet, they have to merchandise the cooler, and they clean the bottles, there should be no dust, etc. But that's also their way of doing a stock inventory check, so that after they complete the merchandising of the cooler, which the retailer appreciates, they go to the retailer and also pick up the order recording. That's a part of their ways of working. As a part of our market visits, I have cleaned so many coolers. I have actually cleaned, would carry a duster, clean up the bottles, etc., etc. So one of the core pieces which I keep hold very close to my heart is, if you're leading a team, you have to be right there yourself. If you can't live a life of your own team member, shadowing them, they are not supposed to do a market visit for you. You are supposed to be with them, support them, understand the challenges they face. So I've done this in Co. I've done this in Uran. I don't know if it was the second wave of COVID, and I was out there in the market because my team was supposed to be in the market. So I can't sit in the office on a Zoom call saying everybody in the market or not. So I was also there. I got COVID. I became a super spreader in my family also eventually. But yeah, and even today, for example, one of the big pieces which we do, and not just me, I mean, that's a culture which we do in Airtel, is we sit in the store. We call it, like a lizard on the wall, just observe, just see how customer, because why would a customer come? Have you been to a recently to any store?
Yes.
You would only go when there's something wrong,
Exactly.
right?
My eSIM, I had to get the X done. So I guess I'm in there.
So one goes only when something is broken, something is wrong, something is not working, you're not in a good mood, you want everything to be done in a jiffy. And so for me, the big piece is, how is my team handling irate customers? How do customers treat them? How do they then go about it? What are the challenges they face? Similarly, I have a very large fleet which goes to customers' houses, RWAs, puts camps. What challenges they face? They work in summers, winters, rains. So I make it a point. I'm in the north of the country in the peak summers and the peak winters in the market. So yeah, I mean, the journey continues, but I also want to say that honestly and truly, I get my entire energy from my market time. So I think my charge gets down when I'm in the office. And till I don't go and recharge myself when I'm in the market with my teams, when I interact with them, when I hear them, when I see them doing what they do the best day to day, I think it just gives so much clarity to me. It tells me what I should do next, what I should not do. All of my thinking, my strategy, my execution comes from that time which I spend in the market.
That's amazing. And I think Airtel also kind of taught me a lot because I think that's one company we share.
Yeah.
And I think I remember every time I used to, come up with an idea, like as a CEO's office, shadowing a leader, doing this in Upper North Circle and then Delhi Circle. And the first thing he used to say is, now for the next 2 days, I don't want to see you in the office. Go visit the market, see how it happens in the real world, right? You have put together a lot of plans, they will change. And I don't want to tell you what changed,
Yeah.
but you will go and figure it out. And I think that's so true. If you're not having the pulse of the market, if you're not talking to customers and seeing the challenges that your team faces on a daily basis. But I think now today, when you're a CEO, people possibly will not be able to relate that you've cleared so many coolers. Right? And I think these are things you have to go through. So okay, this brings me to another point where a lot of people perceive sales as a high pressure role, negative things, cold calling, insurance selling, what you did at the petroleum, right? Which is just finding a customer, going there and striking a conversation and hopefully maybe ending up selling something, right? But tell me how those experiences are so important for you, right? What that did for you back then to now, and now that you're leading such a big organization, how does that help? All the smaller things that you pick up when you go through all of that experience, how does that help?
So actually, I'll tell you, interestingly, after my summer experience, when I started my first job, I interestingly did not start in sales. I actually started in marketing side, brands and marketing. I launched some products in the market. I famously launched, Tata Salt. First organization, Tata Chemicals. So Tata Salts wanted to come with a tabletop dispenser. So I launched that in the country. I was with Wipro Consumer Care. They want to get into liquid hand wash that time from Santoor soap. It was Santoor soap, Santoor's extension. So I launched their liquid hand wash in the country and in multiple countries in Nepal, in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Sweaties, etc. So I made ads, I did brands, I did, media buying, all of that. So a lot of this kind of stuff is where I started my career.
This for how long?
This was for my first 7 years of my career.
Oh wow,
I did this.
good job.
Yes,
Yeah.
good chunk. And interestingly, I shifted to sales because of my life event of having my first child. And that also I say interestingly because that's the time a lot of women I see around me who kind of come out of workforce.
Yeah.
The choice I made was to shift back to my hometown, which was Delhi. And the only way I could shift back to hometown was shift out of marketing because marketing used to happen in the head offices.
Bangalore.
Yeah, so it was Bangalore that time. And so that's how I got into sales. So for me, when you say this, that how these small interventions, being in the market, interacting with the team, how does it really value add? For me, it's actually the moment of truth, right? I did brand strategy, brand architecture, the purpose of the brand, etc. So when I did all of that at the back end, and when I came in the front end where I had to handle the sales of the same product, which I had probably, created on the drawing board, I think really that was a moment of truth for me. I realized that with all the thinking and the strategy, what happens at the point of sale, where the consumer interacts with your product, where your team interacts with consumers or customers, depending on how you're selling. I think that really, really makes a difference. Right? So, all of that brand thinking and everything becomes a truth at that moment.
Yeah.
And hence, your connect, your being there, your ability to understand that what you're doing, what your objective is or target is, etc. So of course it's high stress. It's month on month. The beauty of sales is your daily report comes every morning, right? You cannot run away from that. It is black and white. You are in red or you are in black. I've come in from organizations from Wipro to Coke to Airtel now, where we look at everyday sales. We look at literally a day level sale, not even a month level, week level. Uh, Coke is famously known for driving something called RED, which is Right Execution Daily. Airtel, we do this. We look at for the day, for the month, I don't remember looking at YTD for the year. I mean, it's too old, right? Things have changed. 4G became 5G in 1 year. Yeah. So yeah, so it's, of course, it's high stress, no doubt about it. But it's also what gives you the maximum, for me, it gives me the maximum satisfaction, because also the moment of truth. You interact with the consumers, with your teams.
I think conversation just got very interesting because I think you're one of those rare people who started in brand and marketing and media and advertising and then moved to sales, and also possibly with a family intervention or a personal choice rather than the profession you went for. It was more the location, and that's why what was available to you at that, right? So tell me, you could have moved back to marketing again, you could have moved back to any other domain that any which ways you've been doing for 7 years. You went in and then you decided that you'll stay here and then you'll build your career here, and then now obviously you're leading Airtel's one of the biggest channel, which is stores, which is a huge feat, right? So what was that trigger? Like, how did you decided that? How did you come to the conclusion that I'm not going back?
So honestly, you're right. When I came in, I thought, my kid was 1 year. We were struggling in Bangalore. I was struggling in, as a new mother. I kind of, my life became this triangle between my house, the creche of the child, and the office. I just fell around, constantly on the run, and that's when I decided to make this shift. Honestly, I kind of gave myself 2 years. I said 2 years, I do this. My kid will be 3. I'll either go back to Bangalore or I'll figure out, but I'll come back to brands. That's what I had done, and that's where I was. I felt I was really liking what I was doing. Samir, you won't believe. I came to the sales side. I I think, and I don't call it like this because I don't think I was so clear when I was growing up. This is what I want to do, and this is where I will be, etc.
Nobody is.
I mean, I was not. And so I won't, I say this with a lot of humility that I think when I came to the sales side, I think it was my calling. I I fell in love with numbers, with the black and white of the data, with the fact that there are people and you read people, you interact, your brand comes to life with customers who handle your brands. I think I absolutely fell in love with the space I was in. And it's 15 years now, and I'm not looked back. Of course, now I lead a very different profile. So I still lead a large team which does acquisition daily. But it's, as you kind of evolve in sales, and I would say actually sales is one place where even early on, but as you evolve in sales, it actually becomes revenue, it becomes P&L. You start handling the business, etc. So of course it's evolved now to what I'm doing. But in these years, I have done channel sales. I have done B2B sales. In Coke, I was heading modern trade. I was handling all the cash and carries and all the modern trade stores. I have done uh, now I'm doing direct sales, right? I have done e-commerce sales. So in that sense, I have touched different types of sales, but I absolutely love it.
Perfect. So I think let me also share when I was doing my MBA, right? And I was hugely fascinated with FMCG. I think my family used to call me like, "Why do you want to do that?" I said, my dream is to sell soaps."
Yeah.
At least back then, Nitin Pananchpe son
Yeah.
was leading HUL, and I was a huge fan. Wherever you used to go, deliver a talk, you'll find me there, right? And I used to, possibly make sure that I don't miss out any snippet that is come out with, because HUL again as a company I used to admire. Wipro, Coke, all these companies. And I think it turns out, obviously, I couldn't start there. I actually ended up starting in B2B sales at times. But I think it turns out FMCG creates a talent pool for all industries. Right? Today, I see a lot of people, even in tech businesses, e-commerce businesses, consumer businesses, Airtel, right? Who've come from FMCG. And I think telecom, any which way, is heavily gets a lot of its talent from FMCG. What is different in FMCG? And also, if you can touch upon being a woman in sales and then possibly in FMCG, like some of the challenges, right? Even today, it's a male dominated thing, right? But back then, I cannot even possibly even imagine. So, just take us through that.
So, first, FMCG, I would say, Munch did that, right? In the sense that, the rigor, the everyday rigor. I think it's also very holistic because one thing which you learn in FMCG is not just selling, it's also resource management. And that is why it finally becomes a PNL space because you are either constrained by the resources you have forecasted, or you have to ensure that whatever you have forecasted, you're able to convert it into sales, right? And of course, I'm talking forecasting. And then there's, of course, target. And then there is the entire revenue play within it that, you have so many SKUs or so many products. How do you ensure that there is a value and a volume gain combined for you to achieve your value target and your volume target? I think this kind of understanding, of holistic understanding, uh, I feel FMCG kind of gives you to the next level. And probably that's why it becomes the factory which exports talent everywhere in every industry. Personally, for me, I think it was my dream to be in FMCG too, like you said, once I started doing my PhD. And I was lucky, I got my campus placement with Tata Chemicals. Tata Salt actually is known for sales and distribution. So that's something which always excited me. But yes, being a woman, the side, I think that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to get into sales because I was mentioning about my summers, etc. And I really felt that this is a space I want to be. Uh, uh, Being a woman by default, you are prioritized to be in a big city, in a head office, in a marketing kind of a role. And that's how I eventually started. Uh, Probably it was my calling. Obviously, I was liking what I was doing, but eventually that's how I reached the site. But once I did reach the site, I realized that actually there are the women are not really around. So you become one of the few. And what it leads to eventually is, this space uh, of being being the only one or maybe one of the few women around. I can give you so many small stories, but a couple of them I will talk about. I remember traveling to distributor places, rural areas, etc., etc. जहाँ chairs भी नहीं होती थी, डब्बों में बैठते थे, right? Travel policies were so basic. We used to travel. I remember in Wipro, I came back after a travel and I had not had a good experience and I shared it with my supervisor. Actually, a travel policy got created post that for the consumer care side of where they did not have women that time, but like me, they felt that there would be eventually more women. So they actually went ahead and wrote down the entire policy overnight. So I've also seen that era. I have been to distributor points where the washrooms are either not there or are absolutely disgusting. I've got them changed. And I also believe that why not? And it's not just for the women, right? What about the men? Why don't they deserve a good washroom? Uh, I've, of course, traveled late, ensured that my travel is safe, somebody accompanying me being with my husband on the phone just to ensure that I reach the place where I'm supposed to reach safely. So, multiple such examples. But the other side of some such stories, for example, I remember being in the north region in one of my roles where the sales uh, pressure typically, and I'm not calling out any organization, I would just say culturally, the language doesn't remain very professional, etc., etc. And when I was in the room, I would not for any reason, but by choice, I would not. I just feel that you don't have to be the loudest in the room or you don't have to use certain language only to get your numbers done. There are ways to get your numbers done. To tell your team by shouting that aaj number karne hai versus saying how do we enable, what are the roadblocks, what can we remove. So I think I brought in a lot of that also. And when I would do that, typically initially the feeling was you're too soft. How will you drive numbers? How will you drive teams? I used to get feedbacks till the time the people around me started seeing that numbers are happening. In fact, we are doing well. And they started accepting that there are different ways of leading sales or leading teams. And it's not just about uh, just being an alpha male. And I'm not saying that I get it. He's like that. But yeah, a lot of it is maybe connected to sales, which I say, and I don't just say this because I'm a woman. I've seen a lot of men colleagues lead teams in a very, very caring, in a very people-led, people-oriented manner, and doing very, very well in their jobs. So I think a lot of it is also myths which get connected over the years, and of course the old ways of FMCG were like that, probably, but I have seen all sides. I've seen very different styles of working, selling, interacting with the teams, and I feel some myths we can leave behind now.
So any advice for women who are even remotely, not just women, actually, for everyone, right? Who's remotely even considering building a career in sales? Because, as you said, right, over the years, so many myths associated with sales turns into this negative aspect, and that's why the profession of sales, people, in a way, it pains to say me, but they look down upon it, right? Oh, you are in sales
Right.
versus how actually it should be. Oh, wow, you're in sales. So you're driving the revenue for that company because that's what matters at the end of the day, right? But any advice for those people?
I would just say go for it. I think definitely do a stint in the sales side. Some of you would love it. I mean, I think the one challenge I always faced, I want to tell you this, being in sales, was not at the workplace, was with my extended family, explaining what I do. I think when I would say, what do you do? And I would say, I'm in so and so organization. Acha, what do you do in this? And if I would say I'm in sales or I'm leading a sales team, they would just not understand. They would think, Acha, ye dukaan se dukaan jaake sabun bechti hai. They would not, I mean, uh, and when you say I'm in the market, they don't understand market मतलब shopping करने गई है. so, so yeah, but honestly, I think I would just say that one should, if you have even a little inkling towards this, don't get scared with the myths, the numbers. Actually, the numbers are also a myth.
Yeah,
Of course, numbers are important, but numbers are not important in which part of the organization.
exactly. So exactly. A lot of people tell me that yes, sales there is no job security somewhere because if I not make my numbers, I'll be asked to leave. Where is right? If you'll not perform, it doesn't matter. Even companies who we all admire, they also have to go through layoffs, right? And any which way, it's not about numbers, right? In your case, at least, it's 0 and 1.
Yeah. You know your scorecard every day.
Exactly. Your manager doesn't have to come and tell you that you're doing good. You know you are, right? But in any profession, if you'll not perform, I think merit is everywhere, right? So I think that's another myth that people should not think about. Just dive in, and maybe you'll found that this is something you wanted to do. I think happens with you, and hopefully with a lot of people as well. Okay, now tell me the constraints of scale, right? And I think this is, for a lot of fellow founders, I want to double down on what Airtel does and Coke does, which is even today, they look at daily numbers, which is crazy, right? I talk to a lot of founders who are building great companies. Even they look at weekly or monthly at best. I don't think I'm bet in recent times a founder who's leading a business at early stages, I'm saying, right? But the rigor that you have seen, you want to learn from you, like how to build that rigor and also how to build that at scale. Like today, like even Swaggy, we are just 60 odd people, but we moved from 20 to 60 in 1 year.
Right.
And we are seeing that there's certain challenges, right? And now next year, we want to move to 60 to 100 and grow the business. So tell me the pressure of driving numbers, still keeping the culture intact and motivating your employees and your leaders. How do you kind of balance this? Because these are two very different things, right?
So at least this has been my style, Samir. I've realized that yes, I have worked with organizations where we drive daily numbers, weekly closing almost. Uh, I actually, and maybe it must be by choice, as I'm calling it out because I've done this in Wipro, I've done this in Coke, I've done this in Uran, and now I'm going with Airtel. So I'm sure maybe I choose organizations or the pace around this. But honestly, while I do this and while I lead teams who have to look at daily numbers, uh, actually, I'll say two things. First is the 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 core strategy does not change just because you look at daily numbers. So for me and my team, we are very clear. And of course, we sit, we brainstorm, we look at how our business is proceeding. And if we have to make any changes in the core strategy, we do that. But once we agree, we stick. So, for example, I lead a team of 20,000 people. A lot of it is also because it's front end acquisition, daily acquisition, monthly numbers, etc., etc. So, a lot of it is also driven through very uh, high on rigor incentives, or sales incentive targets, slabs, etc. Now, one of the things which I do very very I would say almost mechanically, I ensure that this happens, is that I don't change my strategy or my inputs to the market on a month to month level. In fact, I try not to change it for the entire quarter, for sure. I try to hold on for at least quarter. Like for me now, 1st April is coming. This is my time to decide if I need to make any changes, because I know whatever I put in now will hold for the quarter of April, May, June. I will not change it because my team gets confused. They don't know whether they should be driving A or B if I keep changing my direction. So everyday rigor, of course, to ensure that there is high execution. Uh, there is uh, there is discipline. I think sales requires a lot of that, right? Very, very heavy discipline, showing up every morning at the same time, doing the morning huddle. I think it gives an absolutely different energy to the morning when you start with a huddle. You kind of call out your priorities. In my store, in our retail stores, we started something called My Promise, which is like a little anthem, not sung, but some words. But it kind of ends by saying that I will be better today than I was yesterday, right? And that for me really matters. That is for me daily record. My daily record doesn't mean I keep changing what I want to do. Today I double my target, tomorrow I half my target. No, it just means I show up every day, right? And I do what I do every day, but I try to be better every day than I was yesterday. So I would just say, because when you were saying this, I would say that any job we do, and of course I'm talking in different spaces, different, like if you're in a B2B space, of course you can't look at day, right? There are long-term relationships, there are continuous, we call it hunting and farming, so you continuously keep interacting, etc. So of course not there. But anywhere where you interact with front-end consumers, or you are at a space where it could be required, I would say I mean, it's absolutely fine to have a daily rigor or a weekly rigor, whatever it suits, as long as you don't confuse your teams when you're doing it. So that's
How do you crack this with Gen Z? Right. So I think I will bring that to the conversation. A lot of things that inspired us, that motivated us, that kind of charged us up, are possibly changing for the new generation coming in, right? When we discuss that we should have a morning sync, we should have a weekly review, people like, don't you think it's a waste of time? We're going through the same thing. It should have been an email, right? Because these are some of the things that our generation kind of got charged up with, used to get energy with. But how do you track this at a scale of 20,000? How do you motivate and charge people up for all morning huddles? And how do you crack it?
So it's interesting. I think two things there. Yeah, one is, of course, we some things we hold very close as rituals. Like a morning huddle is not an option, right? Some things don't change, cannot change. Why? Because even if you are a young manager, or you have great ideas, but the fact is you might be leading a team who's used to a certain way. So some things we call it rituals. With some rituals we hold, but the other is also being agile. So, for example, in today's time, AI or for example, I'll tell you one example of what we do. We do because we lead a large team and it's spread across the country. It is important that a lot of the training or any nuggets I need to, like a reminder or a process change or any intervention, anything I want to communicate, I communicate digitally, right? So digital tools we have, and that's how we reach to the large teams. Now, there, for example, uh, the new generation has taught us how nuggets could be more important. Few second nuggets, 60 second, etc., could be more important than having really long videos which nobody has attention span. So I think it's a combination of both. What you want to hold to and not leave that. But at the same time, how can you be agile and adapt to new ways of working, to new thoughts, to what left swipe and right swipe, etc., to actually keep it very engaging, very crisp and relevant today's time. So it's a constant learning, I would say.
I'm sure with Gen Z, it's always going to be a constant learning. But perfect. I think that sounds amazing. Now tell me, let's get into hiring, right? One of the things I see a lot of people struggle, and including myself,
Yeah.
which is hiring sales leader talent. Which is one is hiring the best sales guys, and a lot of them individually they are rock stars. But the moment you put them into managing a team role, and your expectation is because he's a rock star, now when he'll lead a team, the entire team will also kind of he'll rub on them, and then they'll also become better off, so on and so forth. But a lot of times it's not true. So when you hire talent, and specifically in sales and revenue for leading teams, what is it that you look at? Like, what's your process? What are some things you don't compromise on? Is it experience? Is it what they say? Just want to understand I think for the larger folks.
So it depends on. So for example, when I do a entry level leader, in the sense, I ask them to visit a store and share their observations if it's external hire, and the reason for that is to actually understand how their mind is processing, right? How are they observing things? Are they being strategic or very, very tactical? Are they being very short term in their thinking, or are they thinking a little more structural, solves, etc.? So I try to use a case study methodology. Uh, uh, but when it finally comes to leaders, right, and when you start, then these things don't work. You Of course, I interact a couple of times. I do panels sometimes. I have fellow peers who also participate in this process, because uh, when you're hiring somebody at a senior level, it's very important that the value systems kind of connect. uh, that I feel is more important than the prior knowledge, right? For example, for example, one thing which is very close to me, which I look at, and of course you don't directly ask, but you get cues of it, is I feel respect for the job, right? And not using it as a stepping stone, but the value of why you want to get into what you want to get into. I think for me that really really matters, because all of us finally don't have some formula to copy or follow once you get into a role. It's a constant learning. It's a constant refixing. It's a constant, you need to be agile. In Coke, we used to call it version 1, version 2, version 3. You have to keep coming out with the better versions of what you're doing. You need to keep listening from the ground and seeing what works and what doesn't. So you need agility. I think all of this actually comes down to more value systems or how people approach versus their knowledge. I mean, of course, they need to have some base knowledge, right? Some basic background. So if I'm looking at a leader who's leading a large team, more often than not, they need to have some kind of team handling background, right? Very rarely would I go for a person who would not have any team handling background. But beyond that, uh, I look at a lot of these kind of values. I think one thing which I also look at is how they share their failures, right? And that's one question I always ask, because again, that show talks about emotional resilience, that talks about clarity. Uh, because if you feel that one failure has put you down and you're ashamed of it, something is not right. I think in today's time, this is one big change, right? If COVID has taught us one thing, it has taught us this, that whatever you thought was the way of working, everything has changed.
Yes.
And so I think that's one question I definitely ask when I connect with people. It gives me a lot of insight in their thinking, in their ability to handle ambiguous situations, uh, ability to handle situations which don't go the way you want them to go, etc. So, and finally, you go with your gut references and hope that everything works out. For me, I also take a lot of bets, and I realize that every time I take a bet, which means the other party might not be 100%. Actually, 100% तो कोई भी नहीं होता है. But 50, 60, 70% ready is where you take a bet. And many times I've taken a bet where the person has not been from the same background, from a very different background, etc. And I would say my hit ratio is 66%. 2 out of 3 works, 1 or 3 doesn't work. And I think it's okay.
Ah,
It's absolutely
I think 66% is very high.
so. Yeah, so.
Okay, so take me through that process where now you have a team, right? And their targets to be met. And they're trying that rigor respectfully,
Yeah.
keeping the culture intact, which was intact. But the hard truth is that we have to let go of people based on merit, right? Not based on the business coming down or winding down or wrapping up, but just based on merit. And this is more true in sales. And I think it's also a huge pressure. Exactly, right? So I think I would want you to double click on that because a lot of people think that this only happens in sales, right? But let's say sales plus other functions, that hard conversation has to happen. You have to let go of people. That also rubs on a lot of other people who are around them. Like at scale, how do you manage that?
That also rubs on back on you,
Yeah.
right? It's so tough. But I feel and I believe, and again, this is something which I have acquired over my years of leading teams, is that you are not a fair leader if you cannot take hard calls. In fact, any role where you lead teams, you have to be clear what's working, what's not. And when things are not working, what is the issue? Is it the person? Is it the strategy? I mean, once you have that clarity, action has to be taken. Uh, there is, in fact, you don't do justice to your job, to your organization, to your role if you don't take these hard calls. So I think uh, personally for me, it's very like individually for me, it's very tough. I'm more of a nurturer. I'm more of an enabler. So I will, when I interact with my teams, I think of what I can solve, what I can, unlock for them, etc. Uh, uh, but this is a part of what we all do. It has to be. Uh, I think the only piece which I do when which I take care of when I do this is I am doubly sure that I'm taking the right decision.
Yeah.
If it is on fires. If I feel conflicted, I take uh, my HR partner or my fellow colleagues. My peers. I take enough and more collective information, collection to ensure that I know the right path. Once the clarity is there, then to go with it is better than to take that hard call and to ask the person to take a decision and not continue, etc. It's better to do it for the person as well as for the organization than not have it. And I have seen in some way personally, uh, a poor rating, a fit, process. I have seen people come back and how bounce back. And I have seen people who were struggling in their role, and we have had hard conversations. They have moved on, and they have done exceedingly well. So I think it's again, I know it's emotionally very tough, but I have seen taking the right call actually gives more benefits, even to the party you're talking about, and not just the space or the organization. And I would just say there is no shying out from.
Yes. And I think even for me, when I started building this company up and we had to let go of a few folks based on merit, I think for me, I was always thinking that, and I did not have to go through a lot of it while in my corporate stints,
Right.
maybe very limited, but I had my HR partners.
Around COVID is where this started me.
This started more, right? And in this business, I had no partners. Like, so basically just looking up to mentors. How do we go about this? How do we process this? But I think for me, the biggest piece I found is that maybe at times, even if you have to let go of someone, maybe it's right for them. Maybe they are not thriving here and they'll go to a place and they'll thrive, right? So it's actually, if you'll wait till the end of the year and tell them that performance was not there and now we don't want to do much with you, no much increments, I think it ends horribly for all parties. So it's always better. And I think that's why we say this that we are a tribe. We are not a family, right?
Yeah.
In your family, you don't let go of people. So that's why we're definitely not a family. We're a tribe. And that's how we want to build this. But perfect. So share any sales leader that you've looked up to in your career, even without names, but something that stood out for you, something they were doing so differently that somehow you really liked and that picked it from there.
So maybe what I'll do is I'd not talk about a leader, but some of the traits I picked up over my
Perfect.
corporate years. I think one I remember, in fact, this was my summers. The leader who was my mentor. I remember him being summers. I remember him being very particular about his timing, saying that we need to, because I think sales is another myth. The day never ends,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And absolutely early on in my summers is when I learned that actually it really depends on the leader.
Yeah.
You can lead a balanced team, a balanced work timing, etc. So that's one piece I picked up very early on. The second piece which I picked up from one of my leaders was uh, like he used to know us personally. There was a connect, each of us. And if you ask me, when I think in hindsight, there was no need. Like, he could just, he was at such a senior level that he could just come, demand what he wants, a command for it, and, the team would work. But the fact that he would go above and beyond, I think we truly believed in him, right? And that just changes the entire game of the perspective, because finally you still do the same thing day in, day out, day in, day out. But sometimes the connect is very, very different. So I think that's the second thing which I picked up. The third thing I picked up, and this was from my one of my Coke CEOs who'd come from America, and she had said uh, once, and I kind of just stayed in my mind, is she said that there is intent and then there are results. She said everybody has great attempts. So that very rarely would you meet people who would say that, oh, I didn't work hard. Everybody wants to be their best. But finally, sometimes, how do you differentiate, amongst your team, etc.? You have a set of good people. Is results. And she said, so intention to result, sometimes you have to take the hard call saying, I know the intentions were great. I know you did everything which was required, but finally the results are not there. And I'm not trying to say that if the results are not there, it's team's issue. I mean, if you're not able to get result as a team, you also have to go back to your own drawing board and see if things are working or not. But I think these are few things which I picked up. Uh, I remember during COVID, when we were all that first wave, when we were all at home and online connects and all that. I remember for me, that was a big changing point where, because we would connect very frequently, it was emotionally a very draining time for everybody. Actually, connecting with your teams, knowing their talents or something beyond what they bring in every day to work, I think you just learn that how amazing it can be while you're doing same work, very high on rigor, very high pace. I think it will also be fun.
Perfect, perfect. I think before we deep dive into EBC or Everest Base Camp experience, because we cannot miss out on that, I think one question I ask everybody who's on the show is, let's say if post all your work stints, maybe in your free time as an assignment, you were to hire a CEO of a large business, right? Uh, Tell me, where would you find someone, like with what sort of experiences that he's had? Let's say you're looking for somebody, he or she, of course, right? He or she has been maybe in the last 10 to 15, 20 years of, let's say the mandate is 20 years. Let's assume, right? That you've taken a call that this person for this large business should have 2 decades of experience. And this is a large business, a lot of revenue targets, XYZ, standard any business has, right? I'm not putting it out to you, whatever you think a business does, right? Where would this experience be? What functions do you want this person to possibly would have spent some time for you to be confident to hire them to run a large business?
Hmm. Uh, I would want this person to have a combination of three or four things. One, and when I say things, I mean experiences. First is some place where, of course, I would say people handling, team handling, ground, dirty your hands, get into depth. So sales, front end sales, etc. That's one first piece which I would say. Second, I would say some role which gives design thinking as an experience, because I think the clarity of thinking comes from there. And for me, any leader who eventually leads a team or leads a company or an organization, I think clarity is so important. Being clear on what I want instead of saying I want everything.
Yeah.
Can you be so sharp to say these are two things which are my non negotiables? This is what I want. Of course, there will be hygiene, there will be important elements, but those two things where I will put my energy. I think that clarity comes from uh, roles or experiences which have design thinking in them or uh, building solution, problem solving, right? So that's kind of experience is what I would look at. Definitely without compromising, I would say the financial acumen. It's important to understand finances, numbers, top line and bottom line both, because I believe nothing sustainable can be created with anyone understanding. It has to be operation. So that's the third. And finally, empathy, reading people. I think the perfect mix of all of this is what I would look for.
Perfect, perfect. I think so. What I hear from you is all of this possibly somebody could have picked up if they would have spent time in sales early on, moved the ladders up,
Yes.
handling a bigger team, operations. Financial acumen is something you learn over the years.
Yes.
So it's not like you have to have be a finance guy to do it. All leaders who run companies, they don't have to be CFOs, right? They can have support system there. But if somebody would have done that, possibly that's the ideal candidate you kind of have described, right?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So now let's get into your Everest Base Camp experience. First of all, how did you guys decide that you do it? Because it's very rare, and I think you have two kids, right?
Yes.
One is at the time when you were doing.
And we went, my younger one was 8.
Oh wow!
My elder one was 13. And so it was the four of us, me, my husband, and the two boys. We four trekked. Originally, it was my husband and my elder one who were supposed to go. I obviously did not even wanted to. I didn't think it was for me. My younger one wanted to. He said I would do it. And we thought he was just 8. We were not very clear about it, whether he can or not. Also, we connect a lot of people. We understood that actually young kids can, if they want to, if they have the, I would say, will more than anything else, that they can. They have to be mentally strong. Uh, I think once he signed up for it, I kind of had no option but to sign up for it. So I also kind of got into it. I think I also got into it thinking that we'll go midway. Maybe he'll not be able to cope up, and he and I will come back. At least my husband might go through. This is what I originally thought. And so just to talk about it, Samir, it's a 14-day trek. It takes 8 days to climb up. It's 65 kilometers one way. It takes 6 days to come down, because why it takes 8 days is because every 1,000 meter you climb, you have to acclimatize for a day. So you stay at that 1,000 meter. Say you reach 3,000 meters. You have to stay at the 3,000 meter level for another day. And that day is not like you can't sleep in the room. You have to trek. Even that's the only way to acclimatize. So given that the trek, it's a long trek, I thought maybe I'll be there and maybe we come back if things don't work out. We finished the trek. We did come back. So I mean, we came back after completing the trek, not midway. But yeah, I mean, uh, it was an amazing experience. I didn't think I ever had it in me to do this. I've not been a very outdoorsy person. Never. It was my first ever trek in my life, and so was it for my younger one. My husband, my elder one, has done some treks. Uh, uh, that's the other point, that you can't really come back midway because it's not like a climb, right?
Exactly.
You go up, you come down every day. It's an up and down every day. So eventually, wherever you are, either you go further up or you come back down. It's equally tough. But the reality is, I think my boys were absolutely amazing. They did not crib, they did not cry, they did not give up. The conditions are not very good. So the only good or the only different part about VPC as a trek is you don't stay in tents. You go village to village.
Okay.
Right? So you stay in villages. There are inns where you stay. What happens is above a certain meter, um, I think 4,000 meter. It's 5,500 meters. Uh, above a certain level, the oxygen levels are down. There is no, you're above the tree line. Uh, the hygiene conditions are bad to worse. So initially you get a room where there's a washroom attached. Eventually you get a common washroom. Then there is no washroom. So things get only the food conditions. The last place we stayed in before we did the actual UVC or the final point, you know, even the we ordered for omelets. I think even they were stale because imagine, I mean, there's no oxygen. It's so high up there. The food which comes in once in a while. Water is very precious. So water is the most expensive commodity at that point. Bottled water is like the most expensive thing. Uh, uh, yeah, so conditions are not very good, and also mentally, it's so somebody told us that it's mentally very tough, and मैंने सोचा मेरे कि तुम बड़े strong हैं कर ही लेंगे physically it's actually very tough physically and mentally. Of course, it's a mental challenge, right? Because with those conditions, we were very anxious actually the last few days of climbing up because we were with the kids the last day, and we also realized that we were taking much longer time. So typically a normal trekker would take 6 hours, 6 hours or something. We were almost taking 8 hours. So we used to start trekking at 6:30 in the morning. We would trek non-stop. We would just wait, like stop for lunch. You can't even have a decent lunch because you have to finally start trekking the moment you finish lunch. And we would reach the next inn or the next village by around 4:30 in the evening. So 6:30 to 4:30, almost non-stop we were trekking. So I kind of connected back to what we were discussing earlier, right? Because it's about daily discipline. It's about showing up every morning. It's about saying that I'm doing the same thing every day. But it's important because while it seems repetitive, actually I'm making progress. Yes. Right? I am moving further. But mentally, it is so tough because, uh, I mean, you're doing nothing but just looking down. You don't look up. Shepa taught us that. Don't look up because it's overwhelming. So you just look down, you just breathe, and you just keep taking one step at a time. And you keep doing that for 14 days. So, but absolutely an amazing experience.
I think a lot of life advice there. Right? Just doing simple things with a discipline, right, over a period of time compounds into something very beautiful, right? And I think I'm sure Treks teaches you a lot, right? You can connect a lot that has happened there to your daily affair, running a business, family, relationships, everything. So any specific moment in that trek wherein you were like that we might not, right? Or maybe that brink of where people say that this is getting too tough and I should not have done that. And now when you look back, the thought process is very different. So any such moment that you can recall?
So I recall this particular moment, and interestingly, I don't have a pic for it. So that's the other interesting part I want to share. The first, it's so beautiful, right? It's so beautiful, and you actually see Mount Everest throughout because you keep going closer to the base camp. Uh, it's so beautiful that the first day I have like 100 odd pics in my phone. The second day, 80 pictures. Third day, fourth day, fifth day. Eventually, I have no pictures. And I realize that somewhere survival becomes more important, and you just kind of let go of these frills of clicking photos and admiring to this doing what you do. But I remember this specific moment. You know, uh, we were at this really high level, and we were walking. We climbed up, and there was this kind of a plateau, and we were walking on it. And very far away, down below, I could see that EBC board where we had to go, which means we had to cross this area, climb down, and it was on the glaciers. So climb down through the glaciers, walk on the glacier, and reach that point where you get the photo clicked. Where that's the point for which you've been doing all of this. And I remember that moment feeling, ठीक है देख लिया अभी हो गया. I can't do this because I knew my pace. I would have taken 2 hours to reach there. For those few moments, and then another
2 hours to come back.
maybe more
Where you were.
time back and all that, and even more. And but yeah, that moment, when you're there, it has an absolutely different feel to it. You're on the glaciers, your hands are numb, your feet are numb. You can't understand. You can, you know, hear the glaciers cracking somewhere, and this and that. But you also see when you reach that point, you also see so many camps because that's why it's a Everest Base Camp, right? There are camps of people who are now getting ready to climb to the mountain. Wow. Right? And when you see them, when you see that part, it just makes you feel so small and like a little tiny particle in this universe. You realize that people do so much. Of course, they don't do the EBC like us. They fly down to EBC, but what they do from there, it's absolutely different. So yeah, for me, I felt so long.
Wonderful experience you've had. So I think it's rapid fire round before we kind of wrap up.
Okay.
It's no coffee with Karan, but I think we'll
There's
still.
my hamper, Samir.
I think we'll give you a mark to start with, and soon enough will turn into a hamper. But yes, I think so. The first question for you is any book that you would recommend, sales or maybe otherwise.
For me, I think the one book which kind of like I swear by is The Atomic Habits, James Clear. This concept of 1%, how it has a compounding impact. I think it holds true in everything. Like I literally swear by it in my personal life, in my work life. Uh, One thing which I learned from COVID, besides other things, many other things. One more thing at a personal front, I learned during COVID when I got into the second wave. It was a very tough time for all of us. Is I realized how important it is to take care of yourself first. We hear it in the aircraft all the time. Ki, "Ab pehle we wear our own mask before you give it to somebody else." Kind of my wake up call, and I kind of realize that I have to invest in my own health and myself before I do anything else. And I started reading a lot, and I shifted towards strength training, right? Weight, and I just weights at home. And of course, I took training and the right postures, etc. But the point I was trying to reach to is uh, I was quite amazed when I started. I started with dumbbells of 2 kgs, 3 kgs per hand. And you can't even imagine that your body can be so amazing that you can actually start lifting 10 kgs, 12 kgs. Like I can now go up to 12 kgs in one hand. And I think that itself shows you the concept of compounding and that getting better every day, and it's true for your mind, for your body, for what you do. I think in everything.
Perfect. Perfect. I also absolutely love that book, right? Any sales pitch that you did or you heard that you're a fan of?
Fan of, I think this what I talked about in my store. This is a part of the credo or a promise which we say that today I will be better than I was yesterday. I think for me, this concept that it is actually you're competing with. And there's also another myth, right? In the corporate space, it is a ladder you're climbing, and you have to play politics, you have to climb over others, you have to do this. I've not done that. In fact, I'm not good to do it at all. But
You're doing the real ones.
yeah, fun possibility. But yeah, I think for me, it's more me versus me. And also because when you have experience of more than a decade, what happens is we become very smug. We feel we know it all.
Yeah.
But the reality is we don't, right? There's a learning sitting there every day. And from anybody. You talked about Gen Z.
Yeah.
Biggest learning. When you interact with them, how their mind works, how they look at things, the perspective, it is so, so refreshing, right? So for me, it's more of can I be better than what I was yesterday? I think that kind of holds. So I don't know if it's a sales pitch, but it's like a sales credo which is used here. But for me, it means a lot.
Perfect. Perfect. I think on the question and discussion around climbing, what is Pallavi's mountains left to climb? Like literal or maybe, notional, but what is it that you still feel that you want to conquer?
If I give another literal one, though my family talks about Kilimanjaro, I don't. It's again a very tough, very very tough.
So the conversation has begun.
Yeah, the conversation it has begun. Yes.
It has to start somewhere.
So, but figuratively, I would say, as a mother of two boys, I would say for me, the real mountain is there. If they become the change makers of what we believe the next generation would be, I think as a woman in corporate world, I won't just say in sales, I still feel we're a long way to go. And but I don't think it can happen. The change can happen till our next generation changes, until uh, parents like us, people like us, can make a difference in the next generation's lives. That for them, they don't fight these barriers. They do real stuff, which is, you know, what is required. My younger one today talks about like he's doing a project on climate change. You know, that is the piece. If we can reach there versus talking men versus women, this that. I think that we have so much to do more, right? So maybe for me, that would be the attitude.
So, one career decision that you've taken, which possibly at the time you were scared of, but turned out really well for you.
Very, I mean, I can just say it, straight on. I think when I took a decision of leaving Coke and joining a startup, I was 40. I took this decision. This is Uran. Um, of course, what Uran represents is something which really excited me, and I took a call around that. But I think to leave MNC, a space, I was for a decade, I was there, I had a very good equity, I was doing well. To leave all of that and to get into an unknown space of a startup, uh, e-commerce, I think it was not easy. I remember my father telling me, are you sure? I mean, you have, and rightly so, you have kids, you are also a mother. Why do you want to take up this kind of a call at this stage in your life, etc.? And you're doing well. It was a tough call for me at a very personal level. Uh, of course, a great organization, but personally, to take this call, I remember almost and virtual interviews, etc. So I'm not even seeing the office when I joined in. I almost had a sleepless weeks of sleepless nights, etc. Because I was very. It was a big shift for me. I come from a very conservative thinking. I've always played it safe. So for me, yeah, that kind of stood out. I would just say change the trajectory of my more than my career, my thinking. Digital first, to think digital first than to do things the way we always done. Uh, the kind of talent I met in this startup, I mean, it was mind blowing. You meet people who have started their own startups when they were in college. Because of COVID, it was harsh and they joined the organization. What amazing talent, what thinking. I mean, absolutely limitless. I think my learning went up multifold. Those 2 years have taken up my learning like this. I think today I'm more bold, I can take more risks. I also think more digital. While I think I've still a long way to go. Uh, uh, I think one of the best decisions I took, but it was very made up while I was taking.
I think this will help a lot of startup founders. What you just said, I think because we all say this to anybody who is even remotely considering joining a startup, that don't join the startup for just the equity or the upside. Yes, it's all a part of there, but over indexed on learning. If you're over indexed on learning, the accelerated learning you'll get. Because honestly speaking, even we don't know the answers. Like we will all figure it out together. And I think that's the fun part because large enterprises have figured out and they're executing at scale. And obviously, a lot of innovation happens there. Do new businesses get developed inside a large business? But I think that's what startups bring.
No, it's absolutely amazing.
Perfect. If Pallavi was not doing revenue, businesses, or leading teams, what would she be doing?
Originally, I think I want to be a doctor. I never went through with it. I couldn't handle chemistry. But maybe yes, I still feel like I would want to do PhD at some time in my life. Maybe get into coaching. Uh, uh, Actually, talking about how limitless you can be if you want, and your mind can be. I think maybe somewhere around that space.
Last question.
Okay.
Trust me, that's going to be the last word. So before we wrap up, I think fast forward to 10 years, where do you think the landscape of corporate will be? In sales or otherwise, do you think will be more inclusive? Will have more women leading companies, be in sales? How do you anticipate this changing in next 10 years?
I feel yes, it'll have much more inclusive and very diverse team, and I would say both gender as well as backgrounds, as well as age, right? A combination of all of that. I would also say 10 years from here, it would be very different from what we think it is today. Thanks to AI, thanks to all the digital capabilities and the intelligence which is still getting developed. I feel the way we take decisions, the way we plan anything, any forecasting, everything is going to absolutely be different than what we can even fathom today. The pace is going to be very, very different today. E-commerce, quick commerce. I mean, the landscape is only changing continuously. I feel that again will change a lot. I also feel somewhere that's my view. Maybe I'm a little old school in that, but I also feel somewhere or the other the basics would still hold true. Some of these basics. So maybe the decision making processes might change, but empathy, caring for people, having personal connects, maybe having morning huddles, etc., would still be at the core of what we do. While we do things very differently.
No, I think perfect, perfect. So I think with this we wrap up, and I think thanks for coming on the show. Hopefully, we are taking this to a larger audience, and I think they get a lot of insights and also see your journey. Started with marketing, uh, joined sales by incident, possibly, and then fell in love with it and built your career in such a way that now you're a CEO of a huge business of Airtel, leading 20,000 people, right? So I think these were the conversations we wanted to, that's why we say the Revenue Podcast is about unfiltered conversations with revenue leaders, founders, and TTM experts. So I think thanks for doing this. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Amir.